The sound of dirt hitting the coffin had a muted tone, matching the gloomy day. I stood there, observing as the minister tried to offer comforting words to those grieving. Holding my daughter's hand, her husband stood just behind us, placing his hand on my shoulder to offer solace. My son stood next to me, with his girlfriend by his side. At 49 years old, I never anticipated that I'd be standing at a graveside, burying my wife. I always believed deep down that I'd be the first to pass away. Due to my work and the way I had lived my life, I thought I'd surely pass before my wife, and when that time came, I'd be an elderly man. I felt old, ancient. After the funeral, there was a reception. Everyone came up to me expressing their condolences and praising my wife's greatness, our wonderful relationship, and her youthful age. However, they didn't say what I needed to hear. We had been married for over 20 years with 2 kids, both now independent. My daughter is married and about to give me my first grandchild. My son works in New York City in the financial district, and both are doing well, with many people at our house. Well, I suppose it's now my house. I'm struggling to adjust to being single. For the past 20 years, everything has been ours, not mine. There were about 40 people around, talking and offering their support. I just wanted some time alone. Feeling quite fed up, I eventually slipped out into the backyard and made my way to the back gate, planning to take a short walk. As I closed the gate, someone drove up the alley and parked their car right next to where I was standing. It was Murray, my wife's younger sister, the last person I wanted to see at that moment. You see, I partly blamed Murray for my wife's passing away. Maybe that's not entirely fair to Murray or my wife, but in my heart, I knew that if Murray had kept her interest to herself, Brenda would still be here with me. I informed her that I was just going for a walk, mentioning that everyone was inside, and she had been brought up in conversation. I didn't smile, nor did I openly invite her. I just stated the facts as I saw them. I wanted to be away from there for sure, and I was certain Marie would try to invite herself on my walk. I should have known better, as she just brushed past me and went into the backyard. She had always been all about Murray. That's why when Murray took a sudden interest in Brenda's personal life, I became suspicious. It was out of character for her younger sister in many ways. I sighed, relieved to be free of her for the moment. There was a cloud hanging between us, and a divide that seemed insurmountable to me. Now, family or not, Murray was unwelcome around me. It's a long story about what happened, and how it all led to the funeral today. Life goes on like water in a river, always moving relentlessly forward. Okay, here is my story. This is what happened in my life. Brenda and I met after college at her workplace. I had gone to the insurance company where she worked to renew my home and car policies, and she was the agent assigned to me. I found myself finding excuses to go back after our first meeting, and somewhere along the way, I finally gathered the courage to ask her out. After several months of dating, we realized we were deeply in love with each other, so we got married. We had 2 children and a happy marriage. Until 2 years ago, I never questioned marrying Brenda. We were perfectly matched, like 2 peas in a pod. Then Murray became interested in Brenda's life. I'm sure she had good intentions. I believe Murray thought Brenda needed to branch out and grow. Everything a person could desire in someone trying to be better and more loving could be seen in Murray. She had been trying hard to help Brenda with what she saw as flaws. It began with Wednesday night girls' night out, and soon expanded to include Wednesdays and Fridays. Vincent got added to the mix. It seemed that after a while, Murray was spending more time with Brenda than I was. Of course, this was only true because Murray was taking advantage of Brenda's time when I would typically have been at home. Soon, it was all about Murray or Marie. When it became a daily occurrence, I started distancing myself from Brenda every time I tried to spend quality time with my wife. Marie seemed to be there whenever I wanted Brenda to be with me. Marie appeared more important every time I wanted to take Brenda out for dinner, often coinciding with one of the girls' nights. What had once been a communicative and open relationship became closed off and non-communicative. I couldn't express my feelings without upsetting Brenda and being accused of being hard and unfair to her younger sister. If all I was going to do was upset my wife by trying to be with her, why bother? A few months after the growing girls' night out trend began, I could see that my marriage was in serious trouble, yet I couldn't discuss it with my wife without her becoming defensive and angry. So I did the worst thing possible. I gave up. I spent my time doing what I wanted, and Brenda started doing her own thing. On our rare nights at home together, we felt like strangers living in the same house. Then one night, or rather it started the night before, everything fell apart. I was at home, working in the garage on a project. It was a Friday night, and Brenda and Murray had gone out for their regular Friday outing. They left the house around 6:30, and I found myself making my own supper, something I had been doing more often. Eating in the garage seemed simpler, so I prepared dinner and took it out there. Listening to my boombox as I worked and ate was soothing. I worked until 11 and then went inside. I half expected Brenda to be in bed already, but I was surprised to find she hadn't even come home yet. I noticed the phone's light flashing, indicating a new message. The message conveyed that my wife was staying at Murray's for the night because they had been out for a while, and it was too late for her to drive home safely. She mentioned she would see me in the morning and questioned the point of bothering. I couldn't help but think to myself that I rarely saw her anymore anyway, and suggested that she move in with her sister and find happiness there. I had to admit, I was upset and jealous. Murray's growing influence on my wife had led to my losing her, and I couldn't figure out how to win her back. I missed being with Brenda, our conversations, laughter, and the closeness we once shared. After listening to the message and deleting it, I overheard men's voices in the background. It seemed like a party was happening at Murray's house, with my wife there. I called Brenda's cell phone, but a man answered and mentioned she was occupied. He hung up when I told him I was her husband. I tried calling a few more times, growing increasingly frustrated. Eventually, I had enough and decided to drive over to Murray's. However, no one was home at her place. I then realized that I had dialed Brenda's cell phone, and I didn't know where she was or who she was with. I returned home, feeling angrier and more anxious than ever. I poured myself a drink and contemplated the situation. At some point, I assumed Brenda was making these choices on her own, and the police likely wouldn't intervene for another 24 hours. I even entertained the thought that Brenda had invited those men herself. My mind was playing tricks on me, and drinks only added to the confusion. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and dry mouth. I took a shower, got dressed, and grabbed a bottle of aspirin. After taking a few, I decided to take a few more to relieve my headache. In the mirror, I saw a man with a distressed, lost expression. After having a light breakfast, I waited around for either a phone call or Brenda's return. Around 2 o'clock, Brenda arrived, looking refreshed and wearing one of my favorite dresses, which she had only worn for special occasions. I asked her about her absence and the man who answered her cell phone. She sat down but missed the chair and ended up on the floor crying. I left for the garage, played loud music, and vented my frustration for hours. It became clear to me that Murray had caused the problems in my marriage. Before her involvement, Brenda and I were happy, but her influence had driven us apart. I feared that Brenda was seeking happiness or closeness with another man or men. In the hours I spent in my shop, I came to the realization that I had probably lost Brenda for good. We were headed for a divorce. Going into the house, I found myself alone. Brenda had left, presumably for Murray's support. I went to our bedroom and was shocked to see Brenda's dresser drawers empty. I turned to online banking to protect my financial interests. I went online to figure out how to safeguard my assets, ensuring I wouldn't suffer financially after years of building a substantial savings and bank account. Afterward, I reached out to a friend who had experienced a divorce, and we made plans to discuss Brenda and me. I informed our kids about our strained relationship and Brenda's possible departure. 1 week passed with me immersing myself in work to distract from my crumbling home life. By Saturday night, I was convinced Brenda had given up on us long before the previous week and was with someone else. I finally called Marie's house that night. She was surprised to hear that Brenda wasn't with me, as I had thought she was still upset with me and staying close to home. Marie asked if I had seen Brenda at all, expressing her concern about the situation. I replied that I believed Brenda had left us, attributing it to the fact that she had been going out with Marie every Wednesday, Friday, and sometimes on other nights. I believed this had contributed to the breakdown of our relationship. I added that I thought Brenda might be with the guy who had answered her phone last Friday night. Marie acknowledged that she knew about that night. She recounted how Brenda had returned home on Saturday afternoon, looking as though she had made an effort, and had mentioned a strange guy answering her phone. Brenda had broken down in tears, and later, when Marie came in from the garage, Brenda had packed her things and left. I concluded by blaming Marie for her part in the situation, saying that her actions had cost me my wife and warning her never to come around me again. I just wanted to shut everything out. Her, Brenda, that other man, and life in general. Furious doesn't begin to describe my feelings or thoughts. Just hearing Murray on the phone was enough to set me off. I was angry all over again. Angry and lost. My wife was off somewhere, and I had no way of fixing things. After shouting into the phone, I slammed it down so hard I broke the handset. Now, on top of everything else, I had to buy a new phone. It was a while before I decided to go to bed. As I got up, I noted that I'd been sitting right where Brenda had collapsed not so long ago. By morning, I figured I had lost out on sleep and would have been better off just staying up all night drinking. A dreary Sunday morning greeted me, and I wasn't in any mood to deal with anyone. Around noon, I heard a car pull up in our driveway. Looking out the window, I saw my son climbing out. My son questioned me about what had been happening, mentioning that his mother had come to his place a week ago, upset and crying. She wouldn't discuss anything other than the fact that I was going to leave her. I replied that I had informed him about our problems and clarified that Brenda had left me, packing her things and leaving. This was the first I had known of her whereabouts. He asked if this had been the case all along, to which I confirmed it. He inquired further about the situation, expressing concern and wondering if I intended to be rude with his mother. I explained that I had been exhausted and stressed, having had a week filled with worry and stress. My son had to make a long drive on a Sunday just to seek answers and understand why his mother had sought refuge at his place and wouldn't let him contact me. He mentioned that his mother had gone out with Aunt Murray the previous week and explained what he knew, including the missed phone call and my apparent anger. He asked why I had reacted that way. I provided additional details, explaining that after Brenda's message, I had called her cell phone and heard strange voices in the background. I recounted the conversation I had with the unknown man who answered and how he hung up on me after being informed that I was her husband. My son concluded that his mother had sugarcoated that part and asked if she had cheated on me. I admitted that I wasn't entirely sure what had happened, but Brenda had acted guilty about something. I hadn't spoken to her since Saturday afternoon, and I suggested that they needed to talk to each other. My son agreed to talk to his mother, but expressed doubts about whether she would. He invited me to come to his place and talk to her, ensuring I left any weapons behind. He emphasized the importance of resolving the situation, and he would follow me home, assuring that I would get there safely. During the drive to my son's place, I realized that I still had some love for Brenda, even if she had cheated on me. At that moment, I was willing to try to work things out with her. When we got to Mark's place, he parked and we went inside. His girlfriend was sitting with Brenda, and when I walked in, they both stood up, looking nervous. Brenda greeted me with a cautious, "Hi, Jeff. How have you been?" I felt my anger welling up as I wondered how she thought I had been. I started to lose control, barely managing to contain my anger in time. I blurted out, "How do you think I've been? You cheated." As I raised my voice, I noticed Brenda shrinking away from me. I had to pause and regain composure, saying, "I'm sorry. I've been okay, I guess. Drinking a bit too much lately. Confused about things, too." She appeared pale and anxious. The woman I loved, the woman I had spent most of my life with, was clearly apprehensive in my presence. It pained me deeply. My heart was breaking. I still held love for her, yet she feared me. I wondered if there was a chance to mend things. The young woman, presumably a guest, introduced herself as Jill and recognized me as Mark's father. She expressed a wish for better circumstances to meet. I shook her hand gently and responded, "Me too. I hope we can become better acquainted," although Mark hadn't told us about seeing anyone yet. I glanced at Mark with a subtle reprimand in my gaze. Jill suggested that Mark and she would give us some space to talk and offered assistance if things became difficult or noisy, citing the thin walls in the apartment building. Mark and Jill departed, leaving us to our own devices. I addressed Brenda, saying, "I suppose I need to explain things to you, Jeff. First of all, I'm so sorry, I really am. I inquired if she had something to apologize for and questioned if she had been involved with another man. Brenda responded, "Not exactly. I don't understand." I pressed further, saying, "Not exactly. That's somewhat like being half pregnant, dear. It wasn't just one guy, and it wasn't just once." Her revelation was a heavy blow. I was truly shocked. Learning that she had been with more than one man was nothing I could have anticipated. It was as if the person I had married years ago had completely changed. I felt lost. I asked her if she had made these choices willingly, to which she responded, "Not exactly, I was drunk. I think I had way too much to drink that night. Murray had also been pushing me for weeks to get out. I don't know. Maybe I was lonely too. I just don't know how it all came about. But suddenly, there I was on a bed with two men. Actually, it started with just one guy, but by the end, all of them were involved. Marie was there too." The enormity of her revelations hit me like a ton of bricks. I had expected to hear about her infidelity, but I hadn't anticipated multiple partners, nor had I imagined her and Marie being involved. They were sisters, for God's sake. I sat there in silence, not knowing how to respond. In just a few minutes, our conversation had ventured into her being with other men, and she didn't seem to be hiding anything from me. She must have sensed my inner turmoil. She offered, "I will tell you whatever you want to know, Jeff, if I can. Part of all that went on. I'm not sure how it came to be. I'm not sure when I became who I am now, though I don't know what made me forget my wedding vows or my husband waiting for me at home. All I do know is that at one point, I heard myself begging for more. I'm a terrible person. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve to live." Her sobs overtook her, and she collapsed. I watched her, struggling to recognize the person before me. I was too stunned to say anything. The situation was overwhelming, and I began to feel nauseated. As I provided an update, I mentioned that I had started to feel ill and even vomited. After calming down and taking a glass of water, I wiped my face and returned to the kitchen table. Brenda was in tears, crying softly. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know if things could ever be okay again. I sat down heavily, searching for the right words without getting sick again. I confronted her, asking, "So you and Murray's nights out were for scouting for men, Ben?" Brenda clarified, "No, that never happened before. We had gone to a new club. I told you that I had been drinking too much. Anyway, these guys were buying us drinks and dancing with us. They complimented us and made me feel beautiful and playful. Then the next thing I know, I called you and left the message that I was too drunk. And then we went to their place. Lately, I hadn't been paying attention to you." Frustrated, I raised my voice as she seemed to suggest that it was my fault. "Are you hearing yourself? Brenda, you're the reason. You and your sister, you haven't been letting me even try. I've tried to get you to go out with me, but you've been claiming that you and Murray needed to be together. Not only that, but you told me in the message that you were at Murray's. Brenda, you lied to me." Brenda explained, "No, at the time I thought we were going to Murray's, but the men wanted to take us to their place first, just for a minute. So one of them needed to pick something up, and we never thought it would be a problem. We ended up staying there, though. If only I hadn't thought you should have paid more attention to me, I might have been better prepared to fend off what happened." I couldn't help but raise my voice again, feeling frustrated by her insinuation that it was my fault. "I haven't been paying enough attention to you lately. Again with that. God damn it. Need I remind you that you've been the one ignoring me? You're the one who has been going out with Murray every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday night. Always Murray this and Murray that. You've been pushing me away while taking up with her, to me. You're the one who has been pushing me out of your life." From the change in her eyes, it seemed like she suddenly realized she couldn't place all the blame on me for what she had done. Brenda acknowledged that she hadn't fully realized the extent of her actions until now. She admitted that I hadn't been paying much attention to her because she had been spending a lot of time with Murray, which had understandably upset me. Brenda clarified that she didn't enjoy being in this situation, even though I had previously expressed my frustration. She assured me that she had never labeled me as a derogatory term or treated me as such. She went on to explain that something within her had snapped that night, and she had discovered a newfound enjoyment in her experiences with those other men. The different tastes, textures, sizes, and combinations were intriguing to her. Brenda confessed that some of these experiences were things she had wanted to explore with me but hadn't been able to communicate. She realized that she had become deeply engrossed in this situation and had lost me in the process. Recognizing the gravity of her actions, she expressed a deep desire to make amends. Her eyes reflected a newfound hope as she offered to do anything to rebuild our relationship. Brenda wanted to remain married, stop going out without me, and be a devoted, stay-at-home wife, willing to meet any expectations I had. I expressed my concerns about her commitment, questioning whether she would revert to her previous behavior once things settled down. I pointed out how she had driven a wedge between us by spending so much time with Murray, causing me to feel ignored and avoided. I was bewildered by my own actions and why I had allowed this to happen. As my voice grew louder and anger bubbled up within me, Mark and Jill entered the kitchen, offering a timely intervention. Mark proposed that we take a short break, allowing me to vent to Jill while he and Brenda had a conversation. During our walk, Jill empathized with my anger and acknowledged my right to feel that way. She explained that Brenda genuinely felt remorse for her actions and the potential damage to our marriage. Jill believed that drinks had played a significant role in the situation. I vented my frustration, expressing my strong desire to blame both Brenda and her sister Murray for the time they spent together and the drunken encounter they found themselves in. The resentment and anger I felt toward Brenda seemed overwhelming at that moment. Jill related a personal experience where her parents had faced a similar situation. Her mother had gotten involved with someone while out with friends, causing turmoil in her parents' marriage. Initially, Jill thought her father would be devastated or even angry enough to kick her out, but her parents had managed to work through their issues. I inquired about the current status of her parents' marriage, and Jill clarified that they had worked things out but had not necessarily stayed married. She emphasized that Brenda's actions were undoubtedly wrong on various levels, but insisted that it didn't mean she didn't still love me. Jill offered perspective on how drinks and indulgence could lead to such mistakes, often involving lowered inhibitions and peer pressure. She acknowledged that Brenda had made a mistake, but it was crucial to move forward and address the issue. Jill also highlighted the contrast in our situations, where I had remained faithful without external influences interfering with my commitment. While walking and talking with Jill, my anger gradually subsided. Her soothing manner of speaking had a calming effect on me, and I found myself willing to try and work through the uncertain future with Brenda. With a faint attempt at a cheerful tone, I asked Jill if I could return to the conversation with Brenda, even though I was still grappling with the situation and trying to contain my anger, driven by a sense of righteous indignation. Jill inquired about the state of our relationship before Marie began monopolizing Brenda's time. I admitted that, like most long-term couples, some of the initial magic had faded, but I believed we were doing relatively well. However, I acknowledged that I might not have taken Brenda out often enough, possibly taking her for granted. The presence of Murray had driven a wedge between us, making Brenda decline or get upset when I tried to spend time with her, leading to our gradual drift apart. Jill probed further, asking about the small gestures like bringing Brenda flowers, spontaneous compliments, and making love. I clarified that our bed life was fine, but acknowledged that I might not have been as romantic as I should have been. Jill emphasized the importance of keeping the romance alive and that couples should keep each other close through small gestures. Feeling defensive, I raised the possibility that Jill might be taking Brenda's side. I argued that it wasn't entirely my fault, and that Brenda locked me out after she knew I was trying to make amends. I insisted that, despite my grievances, I had never considered being with another woman, because I loved Brenda too much to betray her in that way. Jill encouraged me to go back and have a direct but calm conversation with Brenda. She reminded me of my own assertion that I loved Brenda too much to cheat on her. She advised me to talk things out, suggesting that love might rekindle, allowing us to move past this ordeal. Upon returning to Mark's place, I found Brenda clear-eyed and waiting for us. Brenda expressed uncertainty about our current situation, indicating her desire to be with me, but questioning whether I would accept it. I inquired about what she meant, and she admitted to her infidelity, describing it as a one-time occurrence that would never happen again. Brenda acknowledged the need for us to address her unfaithfulness and rebuild trust. She asked if I could accept her realization of the wrongdoing and sincere apologies. wondering if we could move forward from there. I conveyed my feelings to Brenda, explaining that her infidelity had hurt me deeply, especially given the circumstances in which it occurred. I mentioned that it was challenging for me to accept what had happened, particularly the involvement of multiple individuals, including her sister. I also shared my frustration with Brenda about my efforts to repair our relationship and how she had initially resisted giving me a chance. I admitted my own shortcomings, recognizing that I might not have put enough effort into our relationship. Brenda acknowledged her significant mistake and expressed remorse, acknowledging that she couldn't change the past and that all she could do was hope for my forgiveness and trust in the future. She understood that the roles reversed would be equally challenging for her. Brenda further explained that her actions that night were influenced by drinks and the allure of a deep, dark fantasy, which she regretted deeply. She expressed her apologies for losing control. I then proposed the idea of a trial separation, which caused Brenda to shed tears. I noticed that she might have expected a more severe reaction from me. I admitted that I still loved her and didn't want to lose her without a fight. However, I also realized that harboring such negative thoughts could lead to revenge, which I wanted to avoid. Jill interjected and strongly advised against a trial separation, sharing her parents' experience as an example of how it often led to divorce. She suggested that we should separate within the same house, allowing us to work through our issues together. I appreciated the wisdom in Jill's words and the potential consequences of my thoughts and actions. I questioned whether I could let Brenda back into my life and how to deal with the anger I felt. Mark expressed concern about my anger and whether Brenda would be safe around me. I acknowledged my anger and potential for bad actions. Jill emphasized that, based on her parents' experience, we needed to confront the situation together rather than separately. She recognized it wouldn't be easy, but suggested that trying to work things out within the same house might be the best way to determine the future of our relationship. I appreciated Jill's advice, but questioned whether she fully grasped the situation, and I needed time to consider our options. The week of separation had taken a toll on our relationship, and I didn't want to make a decision under pressure. I informed Brenda that I needed time to think and asked Mark to take her to a motel temporarily. I promised to give my decision the next morning. Upon my return the following day, I noticed that Brenda, Mark, and Jill appeared exhausted and somber. It was clear that none of them had rested. I knew I had to convey my decision. I suggested that Brenda should come home, albeit with a warning that I might get angry and raise my voice at times. I mentioned that we could work things out by staying in separate rooms within the same house, in our bedroom and a guest bedroom. Brenda seemed relieved but also apprehensive, and I could sense the shattered trust in our marriage. Brenda raised the idea of counseling, to which I responded that we could consider it, but we already had counselors in Mark and Jill. She clarified that she meant professional counseling, and I agreed that we should seek individual and couples counseling starting the next day. As Brenda prepared to leave with me, she inquired about my car's location. Mark volunteered to get it from the local parking garage. To our surprise, Mark revealed that he had proposed to Jill, and she accepted. We welcomed Jill into the family and wished them happiness. We left for home together, the journey filled with silence and tension, and the subsequent week was marked by anxiety. We started counseling the following week. After 8 months of counseling, we decided to move forward on our own, having worked through the pain and nightmares of the past. One day, Brenda returned from the doctor with distressing news. She was seriously ill, with cancer that had spread to various parts of her body. I tried to reassure her, but couldn't shake her sense of dread. We now faced a new challenge, dealing with Brenda's illness. Despite our efforts to remain positive, Brenda's health declined. When she passed away, she was surrounded by her children and me. I acknowledged my lingering resentment towards Marie and the time we lost in the aftermath of Brenda's mistake. Our preoccupation with that situation might have delayed the discovery of her cancer.